Have you ever wondered how a simple act of faith can turn scarcity into abundance? Tune in to Slow to Speak with Vooch Podcast, latest LoFi Friday edition, as we dive into the powerful story of Elijah and the widow from 1 Kings 17, verses 11 through 12, and explore the miracles that faith can bring. Today's episode is brought to you by the new LoFi single entitled Zarephath by Vooch, which is available now as a pay what you want, high quality MP3 file. All proceeds goes towards providing meals for those in our community. Visit our website to grab your copy today and support a good cause. Welcome to Slow to Speak with Vooch Podcast, where deep conversations thrive. I'm Vooch, and I'm happy to share another Lo-Fi Friday edition with you. This week, I'm down to my second to last study of the life and times of Elijah, at least in chapter 17 for some time. Last week, I looked at verse 9, and this week, I'm focusing in on verses 11 and 12 and discussing some of my takeaways from these scriptures. Now, a quick recap of 1 Kings 17, verses 7 through 10 before I read the verses 11 through 16 for today's episode. In 1 Kings 17, and verses 7 through 10, the brook that Elijah was relying on for water dries up due to the ongoing drought. God then instructs Elijah to go to Zarephath in the region of Sidon, where a widow has been appointed to provide him with food. Elijah obeys and travels to Zarephath. Upon reaching the town gate, he encounters the widow gathering sticks. Starting in the second half of verse 10, Elijah called the widow and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." She replied, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and to make a meal for myself and my son, so that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day of the Lord sends rain on the land." She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and the widow and her family, for the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. So here you have Elijah in verse 11 calling the widow to not only bring him some water, but a piece of bread as well. As she replies in verse 12, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, so that we may eat and die." Now, this is sort of kind of funny to me with this part, far as Elijah asking her to also bring him a piece of bread. It kind of reminds me of the times that I used to visit my grandmother and mom. And while we're eating together, as soon as I would get up to go to the kitchen, my grandmother or mom would immediately say, "Here, take this plate into the kitchen as well. And while you're in there, bring me a soda or bottle of water. Also, make sure that that oven is turned off." It was just like rapid fire requests. So it's kind of funny just to hear Elijah say, and by the way, since you're up, bring me something to eat while you're in the kitchen. Now, this is, like I said, this is comical to me, but I digress and get to my main point. So, my main takeaway from this is that Elijah challenges the widow to act on faith and feed him first with the last of her flour for bread. She knew that the Lord was his God and that the Lord would provide for her and her needs. So, by faith, she accepted the challenge and fed him first. Now, it reminds me of Luke 6:38, which reads, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Now, this wasn't about money. It was about supplying Elijah with what he needed. She gave Elijah water, food, and shelter. And God noticed it and made sure her household, along with Elijah, had food every day until the day the Lord would bring rain on the land. But what about us? When we are faced with challenges to give to God and to others first, whether it be our time, energy, resources, whatever, do you trust that God will give you a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over? Again, the widow gave what she had in order to supply Elijah's needs. So instead of throwing money at every situation, we need to consider providing meals, a helping hand, listening ear, clothes, shelter, just being there to provide guidance in any way God calls us to give in that situation. Well, this wraps up another Lo-Fi Friday edition. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I encourage you to like and subscribe and to share this episode if these thoughts resonate with you. Also, visit us on slowtospeakwithvooch.com and make sure you download our new lo-fi track called Zarephath, which is listed in the show notes. Until next time, stay inspired and let's keep the conversation going. Vooch out.